If it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Out of Bounds. We have got a packed show for you today as we get ready for the last signature event of the 2024 PGA Tour season. I can't believe it's here already. We're talking about Bryson's win last weekend at Pinehurst. Who needs a rebound as we head toward the playoffs? The controversy around the U.S. Olympic team and every other major story that came out of this U.S. Open weekend. Nate, let's start with Bryson DeChambeau claiming his second U.S. Open title. Incredible stuff. An incredible Sunday. What a weekend for him.
Definitely extremely exciting. It didn't look like it was going to come down to the last few holes when you started the day, but Josh, it sure did. Bryson DeChambeau captures that second U.S. Open title and does so by hitting it almost all over the place on that final round at 18. Seemed like almost every hole, Josh, he was in that wire grass that we had talked about before. Got a lot of good favorable lies, and just being that incredible strong player, just not really a problem to him. And maybe until that 18th hole where he had to really, hamper his stance. But Josh, an incredible win for Bryson DeChambeau, a big win for Liv if you're a fan of that, and just a big win, I would say, for the world of golf, right? Bryson's just turned into this just enigma, this awesome player to watch, this really fun guy to root for. You saw crowds being really positive towards him all week, right? So just pretty cool for golf to have Bryson DeChambeau capture that elusive second major, and we'll see where it goes from here. He could win another one. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, it was really cool seeing him interact with the crowd, with the fans during play. I feel like that's something we've just never seen, like ever, in professional golf. And it was really refreshing. It was really awesome. Look, for me, Bryson proved why he's one of the best 2 or 3 golfers on the planet. He didn't have his best stuff, still found a way to win. And that's what winners do, right? We talked about it last week. I said it last week after the Memorial about Scotty Scheffler. The same is true here with Bryson. The best players in the world find a way to win even when they don't have their best stuff. And we're going to talk here now about Rory McIlroy's situation coming down the stretch, which was as much as the Bryson story was a huge component of this U.S. Open at Pinehurst. I think Rory's collapse coming down the final 3 holes is right there too. What do you think of that now that we've had a few days to sort of digest everything, watch the putts over and over again that he missed on 16 and 18, and really have a chance to think more about it?
Yeah, 2 foot 6 inches, Josh, on 16, and then 3 feet 9 inches on 18. It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, Justin Ray, who's always awesome with stats and stuff, talked about or tweeted about that Rory hadn't missed inside 3 feet this year. He was 496 for 496, Josh, and he missed that 2 feet 6 inches putt on 16. I mean, the putt on 18 was inside 4 feet. That one did break across the hole, and that one was a little bit of a tricky little slider, so we'll give him that one. But Josh, 2 feet 6 inches on 16. I've replayed that putt in my head. I've replayed it on Twitter and stuff. Josh, I don't necessarily think he mishits it. I think he maybe starts it line off that left side. It does catch the left side of the hole, and he does hit it hard. Josh, we see pros hit these little short putts hard, and we see kind of the ramifications of it. We also see the positives of it. So I don't know if Rory necessarily mishit it. I know there's some talk about, hitting on the wrong side of the ball, but it's just interesting, Josh, with nerves. It's something that we don't think can happen to these guys, especially a guy like Rory McIlroy, who's won multiple majors, but nerves just don't go away, Josh. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, everything I just said about Bryson, I feel like the exact opposite is true of Rory at this point.
He's stone
Bryson
cold.
went out and won. Rory went out and lost, and he really only has himself to blame for it. And, there's going to be a lot of continued analysis of those putts and what mechanically may have gone wrong. Brandel Chambly was really critical of the process that Rory goes through before every single putt, and how, with a little tiny putt like that, he should have gone through something a little quicker, not taken as long, looking at it. And let me just say, I don't know what the internal struggle is for Rory. Like, nobody knows what it's like to be inside of his head and live the life that he's lived. He hasn't won a major now in 10 years. Everybody considers him one of the 3 or 4 best players, of the last 10 or 15 years. But at the end of the day, it feels a bit puzzling and alarming in terms of his career, because now I really don't know how to assess his career. He could go out. You and I were talking right before we came on here. Like, he could go out and win the next major, and he could win a major next year. And he would be up to 6 career majors. But at some point here, we're going to look at his career and look back at all the second place and top 5s and top 10s when he was in contention, and think about whether he was actually an historic great in the game, given the context that he didn't get it done as often as what we would consider the historic greats, the Nicklauses, the Tigers, the Arnies. He didn't get it done as often as they did. And I guess that's just kind of where things sit. He struggles in big moments and he can rebound, but there's also the chance that he doesn't win another major. I know everybody wants to see him win another major, but we can look at a lot of guys who, for one reason or another, just aren't performing the way they did 5 or 6 years ago. Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas. And we ask ourselves all the time, are they going to win another major? Are they going to win another big tournament? And the answer is always, I don't know. I don't really understand why it would be any different with Rory McIlroy, because I feel like he's kind of backed himself into a similar situation. This tournament was his to win, and he dropped the ball in maybe the biggest moment of his career to date.
It's really interesting that you bring up that Bryson DeChambeau talking about, kind of his pre-shot routine on the greens. I kind of noticed that live, Josh, and just the way Pinehurst is set up, some of those last few tees are very close together, right? And I thought it was weird. A couple different times you could almost see that, and they were talking about it too on the broadcast. Rory and Bryson almost, I don't know if lock eyes is the right term, are really watching each other and kind of thinking about, if they want to make a putt here and get a roar to go get the other guy going and kind of show him what you're doing. And Josh, that's really interesting to me, because that's not really how most pro golfers talk about it. They kind of have that tunnel vision, right? They're not really, I don't know if caring is the right word, what the other person's doing. They kind of know what's going on, but they don't know exactly what's going on. And you got to play your own game. And maybe that's a part of that helps Rory miss those short putts. I don't know. But Josh, it's really interesting to me, seeing a pro looking at the other guy they're kind of playing, so quote unquote match play against. I mean, Cantlay was right there, but was he at the same time? And so it's like, I don't know. I just thought it was so weird that they're kind of watching each other and they're really kind of studying each other and seeing what each other's doing. I thought that was weird.
I have a question then. What role do you think Rory, clearly not being the fan favorite, played in how things played out for him at the end? I mean, the fans were very clearly more on Bryson's side.
But you're going to have a pro Rory crowd wherever you go. People do love Rory McIlroy.
Yeah, I'm not talking like all the way to booze, but like
the thing about USA though is different. They're doing USA chants at Bryson. He's getting ridiculed for that.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that played a role in how Rory performed coming down the stretch? Like, legitimately being like, yes, of course, the fans love him. There were plenty of roars for him, but the louder roars were for Bryson.
I want to say no, Josh. I want to say the pros are able to do that, but it's just not true. I mean, he definitely got in his head, but by those chants coming down the last few holes. And I just think it's just so strange to set up too. I mean, the 17th green is right next to the 18th tee. So Rory hits that massive drive on 18, or it's that wayward drive, I should say. And then Bryson knocks on the green. He's got a putt for birdie, and that kind of sways things a little bit in my mind. I thought it was so weird that they're kind of looking at each other, and Rory, you could see it. Rory's turning around and watching where Bryson is. And that's just not something I feel like you'd see that much. It
isn't. I will say the the golf fan in me who wants to see a more engaging version of professional golf absolutely loves it, even though I think you'll see more professional golfers, I guess, fall victim to that kind of environment when they aren't accustomed to it, because that really was a unique situation. Course layout played some into it, but also just how it felt, and this is the wrong word, but I'm going to say it anyway, felt more aggressive. Like it felt more like in your face. These two guys are going head to head and they're battling each other. I think that you could have more of these situations play out where the pressure is more real and tunnel vision doesn't necessarily work if you have this kind of environment created at a golf course for a major championship.
And it's an amazing environment, like you said, Josh. And I think a lot of that is just because it's Bryson. I mean, he's the only guy that I could remember, Josh, that interacts with the crowd while play is going on. This isn't a practice round. This isn't a Tuesday at Pinehurst. This is Sunday with the lead on the back nine, and Bryson's, waving to the crowd, and he's pumping up the crowd. He's raising the roof. He's talking about saying, on Saturday, he said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go for this green, and got a good rise out of the crowd. Right. So he's working with the crowd and kind of pumping them up, making that awesome atmosphere during play. And I just think that's something we haven't seen before. I mean, you might see guys raise their hat if they make a putt, or they tip their hat, right, if they make a putt, but not usually something that happens. And it's just amazing how much Bryson's changed that so far. I think you'll start to see players sort of embrace that role a little bit more. I don't think anybody will ever be able to do it like Bryson. I think that's going to be really challenging. He just has the perfect personality and perfect candidate for that role, right? And I just think it's so cool because Bryson, I think, is the only player in my mind that went to live, took the big bag of money, it took the cash, it became more likable. Josh, I think you can confidently say that all the players that went to live decreased in a lot of personality wise, in a lot of people's brains, right? But Bryson DeChambeau only gained respect in my mind.
Yeah. I think a lot of golfers could do it. We see it during the Ryder Cup, right? We see guys interact with the crowd, be more engaged. I think every player would have to do it in a way that looks and feels genuine to the character that they are in professional golf. I think the thing that Bryson said a couple weeks ago or last week, whenever it was, about being an entertainer first, who also happens to be good at golf, that's the thing that I think every professional golfer should remember, is that they are an entertainer first and really good at professional golf second.
He knows where his money comes from. I'll tell you that. He gets it.
Yeah. And I think it creates a more engaging product overall. Like the viewership numbers were incredible. I think there were over 11.5 million people watching on Sunday for the final round broadcast for that duel coming down the back nine. It's good. It's good for golf. Bryson is good for golf, but I think a lot of guys can't accomplish that if they want to try and find it. Now, we could have a reverse scenario here coming up at the Open, I suppose, right? Like Rory would be the hometown favorite or the home continent favorite. And, Bryson and Scotty would most definitely not be. So we'll see if the fans carry this over to the next major championship here. But let's talk Pinehurst a little bit. What did you think about the setup? It didn't seem to me, with all of the hype coming into the week, it didn't seem as brutal as it could have been. It felt like in certain spots it could have been worse. Obviously, there were plenty of places where the course was unforgiving, but it was a U.S. Open setup.
I thought they nailed it, Josh. I mean, I think it's unnecessary to have a golf course where you're just punished all the time. I think, finishing around even par, right? I think it's bad. And in a way, I like how players can hit these really great shots and be strategic where they landed on the green, Josh, and they get rewarded with a birdie opportunity. And if they don't, you saw Rory McIlroy, I think it was on number 5 on the front nine on Sunday, where he landed his short, the ball bounced over the green because he wasn't necessarily strategic about where he lands that ball and where the kind of the swales are. So I think Pinehurst is really cool in that sense, where guys are just being really smart and having to know the game and know the golf course and know every part about it. I think that's really cool, Josh. And it just proves what we've been saying here on this podcast for probably ever since its existence. But golf courses don't need to be 8,000 yards to be difficult. I mean, They don't need to be that to be difficult. They don't need to be unnecessarily long, where we saw really long holes at Valhalla and guys chew them up anyway. It's all about these green complexes and how cool they are. Josh, there was so many times where a guy would hit a wedge into a green and you would go, is that ball going to stay there? And most of the time it doesn't. It rolls off the green or it rolls into a different spot where it's a lot more challenging. So I thought that was really cool. And just the overall look of Pinehurst too, just without really any rough. You have that wire grass that kind of outlines the big, large looming fairways, which I think is really cool. It's just ultimately, at the end of the day, Josh, it's a test. It's a really good test of golf for the U.S. Open. It's not a bogey fest. It is a little bit of mix of both. And Josh, I think that's exactly what you want to see at a U.S. Open, especially on a Sunday.
Yeah, I want to see it at a U.S. Open. I want to see it once a year, maybe twice a year. I don't want every week to be like this. But to your point, and to the point that we've been hammering home on this podcast for, like you said, a couple of years now, you don't need to make a golf course long to make it challenging. And the idea that more golf courses that host events couldn't make those tracks more challenging just by stretching out the greens a little bit, make them a little firmer, growing the rough out around the greens a little more, focusing on the green complexes instead of just, lamenting over the fact that you can't make the golf course 8,500 yards long. It's the obvious answer. And for the people who say, well, you can't, my answer is all of these venues host an event that's ultimately 4 days long. They spend months preparing. If you can't prepare any differently than you have for the last 40 or 50 years for an event that's 4 days long, then maybe you're not a great host venue. Because at the end of the day, there are going to have to be things that change. Because I don't think people love to see the events where, winners shooting 20 under par or more. I think every event, especially for signature events, somewhere in that -8, -9 to -15 territory is probably where people want to see. The average golf fan wants to see these guys end up. But
yeah, like Bryson was 6 under. I think that's exactly what they were planning on, right? I mean, you look at the Vegas odds; they were sitting at 274, and boom, it landed on 274. So it's. I think that part's good, right?
Yeah, I agree completely. Let's talk outcomes here. Other than the top couple guys we've been talking about, other than Rory, who had the most disappointing weekend performance?
I thought a weird sort of performance out of Brooks. We saw him on Thursday morning. If you woke up early, you saw Brooks making a bunch of birdies in the early part of the day. He starts 3 under through 10, and you're like, oh, Brooks, he plays really well at U.S. Opens. Obviously, he's won a couple times, but he's really good on difficult golf courses. And then he just kind of flails and shoots a bunch over par on Friday, makes the cut on the number, Josh, and then just kind of shoots 71, 70 to keep moving on. And I thought that was strange. You think a guy like Brooks, he starts off 3 under through 10, he's going to be in the mix, right? So I thought that was really disappointing.
Yeah, every guy that struggled putting, and that was where Brooks really struggled the most. For me, I actually think it's Ludwig Aubert. Because for the first time ever, we saw a guy who showed his youth. He looked young. On Saturday, he got too aggressive. It essentially cost him the entire tournament. He triples, I think it was 13 or 14. He has triple bogey coming down the back nine, and he's playing catch up the rest of the way. And you can't win a golf tournament like this playing catch up. It's just not possible. So to me, that was the most disappointing weekend performance. It was actually kind of interesting. A lot of the guys that I would have said had a disappointing weekend performance had they made the cut just didn't make the cut, so I couldn't include them, which is a separate wild fact. Scottie Scheffler, non-factor, barely makes the cut, never got it going over the weekend. Can't even say you're disappointed with his performance because of how he's played over the last several months. Any cause for concern?
No, still ranked top 10 in strokes gained tee to green. He was 10. Still hit the ball pretty well. Josh, he wasn't a world beater with his irons, which is something we normally see out of Scottie Scheffler. He was 70th in putting, and only 74 guys made the cut. So it's just, it's unbelievable that he can just keep doing this a week in and week out. We saw a frustrated Scottie Scheffler a little bit on Friday. He threw his putter a couple different times and just showing that he was frustrated. So there's something going on with that stroke. And then if I were to venture to guess, there's going to be something going on with that stroke for a long time. So definitely no cause for concern, but definitely weird to see Scottie Scheffler battling that cut line on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, he said it. I thought it was really interesting. He said he felt like he was putting a good stroke on the ball all 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. He just couldn't get anything to drop. And he was really struggling reading the greens. And it was clear watching him play that he was having a legitimate challenge reading those greens. But that's going to happen. It's a major championship, and that's how it goes. I just think that having had some time to reflect on it and look through the numbers, and I wanted to go back to that Tiger Woods 2001 season that everyone loves to compare Scotty's current run to. And, that's the year Tiger won the API, the Players, the Masters, and the Memorial. He had 6 finishes outside the top 15 that year, which is to say he was out of contention in those tournaments. And same goes with the US Open and PGA Championship that year. He finished outside the top 25 in those 2 tournaments. So, and there isn't really a ton of debate among golf fans that is either that or 2002 are the gold standard of dominance in professional golf. It's impossible to reflect on historic performances in real time. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are trying to do with Scottie Scheffler. It's golf. At the end of the day, you're not going to win every tournament. And he's just that's weekends like what happened this past week at Pinehurst. It's going to happen, even to Scottie Scheffler.
Who hasn't finished outside of, I don't think, the top 10 this year in majors is Bryson DeChambeau. I think that's reasonable to talk about. I mean, obviously it's reasonable to talk about, but he doesn't play on the PGA Tour. I mean, that's a whole nother problem. But yeah, he's got a win. I believe at the Masters he was T5, and then I think he was second at the PGA. So he hasn't finished outside the top 10 definitely. It's just it's wild when you start to think about it, because Scotty's on this unbelievable run, and then you look at Bryson DeChambeau and you go, oh wow, yeah, that's right. He has played that well in majors.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, and we're going to talk here in a couple minutes about the Olympic team. And I think that what you just said about Bryson DeChambeau is really important to that conversation. But first, let's wrap up here this U.S. Open talk with of the guys that didn't make the cut, who are we most disappointed in seeing not get there? Obviously, Tiger Woods, Cam Davis, Will Zalatoris, Jason Day, Nick Taylor, Adam Hadwin, Justin Rose, Max Homa, Victor Hovland. None of them made the cut. Who's the one that you look at out of that list and say, "Ooh, that's really disappointing"?
For me, it's Homa. I think you kind of saw him turn a corner a little bit at the Masters, or you thought you maybe saw it turn a corner. He'd been a guy that really hadn't contended that well in majors, and then he was there on Sunday and played extremely well and just came up a little short. So you're like, okay, that's huge for Max. You can build upon that, right? And then he goes to the PGA and doesn't play well, and plays at the US Open, doesn't play well, and misses the cut. So it's just really weird for Max, because since the Masters, Josh, he has one top 10. And that was at the Wells Fargo that Rory McIlroy kind of ran away with. He was 13 back. So you want to call it top 10? Go ahead, sure. But it's just, it's really interesting to me, because Max is this player that we all love. He has this presence about him that's an extremely likable person. And Josh, he just hasn't played his best golf in the majors. And I don't know. It's just really weird about Max, because you really want him to, and you really want him to play really well, because he's so much fun to play and so much fun to watch when he's in that hunt on final day on Sunday, especially. And I thought we would get that more after that brilliant performance at the Masters for him, but we just haven't.
Yeah. For me, it was Victor Hovland, especially, I talked about it last week, seeing what happened to him in the Memorial in the last 2 days there, and seeing this past weekend at the US Open, just not being in contention really at all, seriously. And then also Justin Thomas, just another major goes by with a missed cut, and just miles and miles and miles away from being in the form that we were accustomed to seeing him be in. Yep. I'm sure he can get back there, but to me, it was those two. It's interesting, because I think moving forward, we're probably going to be asking ourselves who needs to really get things going. And Victor Hovland is probably atop that list just because of how he ended last season. But Justin Thomas, I feel like, is on the verge of like not being in signature events come relatively soon. So let's hope
he's in the next 10, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so let's hope that he finds something here before the end of the season so we can continue to see him playing, because of course he is a popular player that a lot of golf fans like watching. You mentioned it. You kind of hinted at it. Bryson, obviously not on the Olympic team. Wyndham Clark and Collin Morikawa clinched the last spots on Team USA. How crazy is it that Bryson's not going to be on the Olympic team?
I mean, yeah, it's just absolutely absurd. I mean, for some reason, we're using no WGR on the Olympic team. I mean, it's not just Bryson, it's Cameron Smith too, in my mind. You look at the Australian team, Jason Day and Min Woo Lee are the two representatives for them. You're not telling me that Cameron Smith isn't better than one of those guys? No offense to Min Woo Lee, but Cameron Smith is an absolute a legendary player on the PGA Tour, a major champion, and a guy that deserves to be there. But yeah, Josh, it's just really sad. It's just we're not going to see the best players playing on one of the bigger stages in sports, right? In the Olympics. So it's really tough to see. Josh, I know you have some stuff too that you want to say, but just I want to leave you with, why isn't there Olympic trials like we have for all the other sports? You see the players playing against each other. U.S. Olympic trials, especially for swimming, have been going on like crazy these last few weeks. Why don't we put the guys playing? Why don't we play them together and see who the better player is? I understand that it's maybe because we have this tour and we have this qualification system already in place. But Josh, maybe it needs to be revamped. Definitely needs to be revamped, and I'm sure it will be next time we see the Olympics. But yeah, Josh, maybe some trials could be interesting.
Yeah, I guess my concern about trials is that you get kind of like a fluky outcome that isn't necessarily reflective. Like the whole argument for Bryson over Wyndham Clark, not Collin Morikawa, but the whole argument for Bryson over Wyndham is the consistency in big moments, in big spots.
Right.
Wyndham Clark's only win is a shortened event at Pebble Beach, and he hasn't had a top 10 since April, and he's missed 2 of 3 cuts at majors. You can make the argument for Collin Morikawa that he's been among the 3 or 4 most consistent players this season. So it makes sense. Makes sense to put him there. But the Wyndham over Bryson makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. You mentioned it. I've got it as a sixth place finish, second place, and then the win, obviously, in majors. Whether it's 5 or 6, doesn't matter. They're all top 10s, and 2 of those are almost either a win or an almost win.
Right.
That goes a long way in my mind.
I mean, just going to Paris without our best guys, it's like the Ryder Cup. It's not bringing Bryson there too, and we'll see what happens with the President's Cup. But yeah, it's just not going with your best guys, and it's just disappointing to see for all of us. I mean, we've continued to talk about how this split, lack of merger, I should say, is bad for the golf game, and this is just another example of it, Josh.
Yeah, at the end of the day, all this stuff just hurts. Hurts golf
us
fans, because you get a worse product, and at the end of the day, all golf fans really want is just to see all of these guys playing together again. That's it. That's all they want to see, and it's so silly because you've got all of these archaic, outdated processes that are essentially just standing up as roadblocks to us getting that. So I don't know. To me, that's
look at how much fun that Sunday at the U.S. Open was. Why can't we have that at an elevated event where Rory and Bryson are battling, or in another one, Koepka and Scottie Scheffler battling? I don't know. It's just really sad to see because of how much fun it really is on Sunday when those two guys are going at it.
Yeah, look, I mean, a million people have already said it, but if 4 events are the only ones that are really going to matter, where all the best players are actually playing together, we just morphed into tennis over the course of a couple seasons. Yeah. So it isn't, to me, it's not the best way forward for golf. And this is one of the things that I think will have a new process by the time the next Olympic run comes into the equation. I think we'll have unified play. I think we'll be done using OWGR to rank players. And we will be in a better place overall. But we'll see. Tiger Woods, this past week, was this his last U.S. Open?
I don't think so, Josh. And I know he kind of alluded at his press conference that it could be. But Josh, I thought he looked physically the best we've seen him this year. And I know that's weird to say, especially with a missed cut. But Josh, it's just at Pinehurst, especially too, not a pretty flat golf course, and it's extremely hot. So those are two of the things that go with Tiger Woods the most, right? He needs a flat golf course, and he needs one that's hot. But Josh, at the end of the day, he just doesn't play enough. I mean, you can't play 4 times a year in competitive golf. I mean, he's playing all the time, but I mean competitive golf and expect to make the cut and even possibly contend, right, Josh? It's kind of just sad to see him kind of waltz around the golf course. But Josh, he still has the game. He can still hit those shots. He still has those soft hands. So if we can find a way to get Tiger Woods playing more golf, I mean, he talked about playing once a month, right? And that just hasn't happened. And maybe that's a golf cart. I don't know. I don't know if Tiger's ego is too big for that, but maybe that's something we need to see and something we need to start talking about. I mean, Morikawa talked about at the Memorial that he still has the game and he just can't walk.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, that sort of seemed a bit overplayed, I guess, because to your point, I would even take it a step further. He looked good. Physically looked great.
Yeah, I think he looked the best. In my opinion, he looked the best out of the few times we've seen him this year.
So, to me, it really does just boil down to he's not playing enough. But right. Listening to him talk, I'm starting to wonder how much he even wants to. Because, and maybe it's just what it takes to get ready for a golf tournament at this stage in his life and his career. Maybe the before and after is just too much. Would be completely understandable, given what he's gone through, given what I'm sure it takes to physically get himself ready for that first round. Maybe it's just not feasible anymore. And maybe he's starting to come to terms with that. And, I believe it was last week, either right before the U.S. Open or during the U.S. Open, we had the report about the quote unquote Tiger Woods rule where, any player with 80 plus wins was going to be able to get entry into any signature event they chose after this year. Maybe all that's part of the whole deal here where, he is going to try and ramp up and play a couple more events next year. Look, personally for me, I'd rather see him playing the Memorial. I'd rather see him playing the API, the Players Championship, than seeing him play the Open or seeing him play necessarily the PGA Championship. Because at the end of the day, I think golf benefits more from a more consistent view of Tiger Woods than just 4 times at the majors and nothing else.
Right. I think that golf cart conversation could be a serious one. And I know he's gone the other way on the golf cart conversation, especially earlier in his career, talking about how it's not right. But Josh, it could really benefit him because some of these golf courses are just an impossible walk. I mean, Pinehurst is extremely long, and we talk about, somewhere where the tee boxes are in relation to the greens on being very close, but there's some that are very far too. But it's a very flat golf course and a one that was in the mid 90s to upper 90s, and it didn't help Tiger Woods, right, with a missed cut. So I don't know what the solution is to that, but Josh, isn't it so cool in the practice round seeing Charlie Woods out there with the dad walking around and kind of reading putts and getting him ready for that U.S. Open? That's just kind of what it's all about in my mind. That always gets a smile on my face when a guy is able to spend time with his son and get ready for the golf course that way. Charlie is an incredible mind for golf and obviously helps Tiger Woods tremendously, or he wouldn't have him there. So it's just pretty cool to see those pictures come out and kind of see them walking together and being able to experience that as father-son duo. Yeah,
it's interesting. And I think if Tiger did make himself more of a presence at the signature events for the PGA Tour, I think it would help with the branding, and especially in light of what you just were talking about there with his son. Obviously, his son is super engaged with the game. I think seeing more of that would just be a net positive for golf in general. And I almost feel like he could win a signature event. You know what I mean? I feel like he could go out and win and a non-signature event for that matter. I feel like him only playing the 4 majors of the year almost sets him up in a no-win situation where they're the least likely of tournaments that he's going to have a chance at actually contending and maybe winning. And because of that, at this point in his career, he's never going to get any momentum going. Like, before he won that Masters, you have the buildup of, he wins the Masters in 19, but before that, you've got this buildup that's happening in 18 that was so instrumental. And, without that, I don't know that he can get competitive again, but again, he's older now. It's different. Things have changed. Games, hyper competitive guys we're talking about guys in their low 30s looking like they're borderline washed up. So, what's to say Tiger could get back there?
Guys these young guys are just unafraid, Josh. There's no real way to look at golf and say, well, they're afraid to make birdies and they're afraid of the big spot, Josh. There's so many young guys, especially in golf now, that will make 4 or 5 birdies in a row and go upseed a guy like Tiger Woods. It's just the way golf has changed in the last few years. We've seen it week in, week out on the PGA Tour and in other spots too.
Dude, they're freaks of nature. Yeah, they're like the freak athlete is in the game of golf is no longer an anomaly. It's the standard. And even the ones that don't look super athletic are absolute freak athletes. Ludwig Ober is a great example of that. He is playing and contending in some of the biggest spots in the sport in his first full season with a partially torn MCL.
Right.
Like that's athlete behavior, period. Golf season quickly disappearing. We just talked about the Olympics. You got one more elevated event, one more major. I've asked this question several times along the way here over the last 30 days or so. Who needs to get it together? Who out of the players that have kind of had quiet season so far, who needs to get it together the most?
You mentioned him earlier in the U.S. Open, and you were disappointed with his finish, but I'm just disappointed with the season overall, and that's Victor Hovland. I mean, he sits right now 49th in the FedEx Cup as we get closer and closer to the playoffs. He's 49th. They take the top 70 in that first playoff event. Are we going to have another Justin Thomas situation where he misses the playoffs entirely? Who knows? I think Victor Hovland's going to get into gear. I think he'll make the playoffs, especially, being able to get a lot of points in this coming week at the Travelers he can't miss the cut, so he's going to get points any other way. So I think he'll make the playoffs, but definitely needs to get it in gear, I think, right, as we get to the spot where he totally owned it last year. So I think he's going to need to get hot, and he's going to rely on past experiences at these golf courses to sort of propel that.
Yeah, for me, and I don't want to spend too much time hammering on this because I've already talked about him a bunch, but Wyndham Clark, if he doesn't deliver at the Olympics, and you look at his season, and it has definitely been lackluster for reasons I've already mentioned. Combine that with letting your country down when everyone wanted to see your spot given to Bryson DeChambeau. That puts you in a real tough spot. And but for his sake, I hope he turns it around because that would be absolutely crushing, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's got a lot of pressure on him at the Olympics.
Yeah. You were really tuned into this low-am battle at the U.S. Open. Talk to us about what you really liked about that.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. And, Neil Shipley's a guy that we saw him play with Tiger Woods at the Masters, win low-am there easily. And then we have this battle at the U.S. Open, which obviously has a ton of AMs in it every year. And it's really cool, the qualifying system they go for. And Neil Shipley's a guy where if you're tuned into college golf, you don't necessarily know his name. I mean, you're looking at like Gordon Sargent, Hiroshi Tai are two guys that are big in college golf. Neil Shipley, kind of a late bloomer, didn't play super well at Ohio State where he was a graduate student this past year. Played pretty well, but not super well. And you have this sort of battle, right, where they both start at that, I believe it was that 6 over number where they started, and it comes down to the final hole. Luke Clanton is in the wiregrass and hits a really good shot where he's got a birdie putt to tie Neil Shipley. He misses that. He misses the comebacker, and Shipley ends up winning by 2 there. But just really cool, Josh, to see 2 young guys in the game. And I think it goes back to what I just said, where these guys are unafraid. They're not afraid to hit really good shots at really big, huge moments. I mean, Luke Clanton was off to the side. He was off in the wiregrass and hits this spinner to about 5 or 6 feet and almost makes the putt too. So it's just pretty cool to see. But Josh, we got to talk about Neil Shipley and how he's where he's going to be next year because, he's already announced that he's going to go pro, and we'll see what that means. Right now, he doesn't have status on either the Korn Ferry Tour or the PGA Tour next year. He played poorly in the PGA Tour University rankings. So, Josh, we're going to see him on the Americas Tour, it sounds like. But I would be hard-pressed to see him not get some exemptions into some non-elevated events and kind of figure it out that way. I was kind of hoping we'd see one this week at the Travelers, but we're not seeing it. Unfortunately, some of the other exemptions went some other ways. But Josh, Neil Shipley, a lot of fun to watch and kind of shows what could be the future of golf between him and Collin.
This is so dumb because the idea that there isn't a fast track to the Korn Ferry Tour or PGA Tour.
Well, there is. He just played bad.
No, I mean, it doesn't make, what he did in the past doesn't matter. He was low am in the first two majors, or the two of the majors this year. Nothing else matters, right? That's really the world of golf, the world of professional golf needs to figure out how to be nimble, and not shoot itself in the foot when it has a golden opportunity in front of it. Neil Shipley is one of the coolest stories that's come out of the Masters or now the US Open this year. And he doesn't have access to anything. He's got to figure out how to get, he beat a bunch of guys who couldn't even make the cut, who have access to all of these things. We need to be smarter. Professional golf should definitely be smarter about how it's capitalizing on these opportunities. And if you want to view it as capitalizing on these opportunities, I understand. He's a late bloomer. He didn't play that well in college. He was not the quote unquote elite type of player. But guess what? He stood up and he's delivered. And to make the argument that there isn't a place for him on the Korn Ferry Tour right now is just crazy sauce. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I don't know if it's too much to ask for, Josh, but I think it's kind of wild they don't get him in the Travelers this week. I mean, got to kind of strike when the iron's hot in that sense, right? The Korn Ferry Tour is doing some cool things too. They have John Daly's son, John Daly II, playing this week. It's hard to believe we can't find a spot for Neil Shipley, even if it's not at the Travelers. I mean, I'm sure you'll see him in some of the fall championship events on the PGA Tour. I'm sure he'll get some exemptions there. But yeah, we're going to see Webb Simpson play 72 holes in the Travelers this week. That's fun, I guess. But I feel like you could see a guy like Neil Shipley. I don't know. I don't know if that's too much to ask for. Me wanting him in an elevated event. I don't know if that maybe is too much. But yeah, let's find a path.
Does it ever feel like this is the internal battle I've had watching the PGA Tour over the last couple years? It seems like too often they lean into tradition rather than just doing what the common sense right answer would be that's right in front of them. In this case, it's get Neil Shipley into either give him exemption into the Korn Ferry Tour events coming through, or non-elevated events on the PGA Tour, or something. Create a schedule where he can play. Let him play in the fall. Let him play in the fall series. Couldn't he play in the fall series?
I think that'll end up happening.
Let him, because in my mind, if you're saying, well, he didn't make it, he didn't go through the channels that a person of his age and of his experience needed to go through to get access to the PGA Tour. In my mind, he leapfrogged all of that by finishing low am in two majors this year.
Yep,
where the stakes are the highest. It's just,
it's a short list of guys that have done that.
Very short list. What'd you think of the watching experience? A lot of people were complaining about some streaming issues, complaints about the US Open app. I think you and I have complained about every major app that has existed to date. But the criticism warranted, overblown, somewhere in the middle?
I'm somewhere in the middle, Josh. I didn't have a problem with streaming at all. I think I said this last week, and I said it in a couple of videos I made too. I love how there's just wall-to-wall coverage for the US Open. You can put it on any sort of streaming service. I'm going to watch it. So I'm not the best to criticize that. And also, people had issues with buffering on Peacock especially. I didn't have any issues with that personally. So that was one thing I can't speak on. But Josh, there's a couple things that are annoying to me. I think it is annoying having to look at the schedule all the time and trying to figure out when things are on and where they are. Like Thursday morning, from like 5 to like, it was close to 1 or maybe around noon. It was on USA. And then Friday morning, the same time, it was on Peacock. I think I understand where they're coming from. They have to kind of let all parties have a chance at it, but just having to look at both things and say where we are and having to look at your phone before you can just go to your TV and watch golf, right? So I think that part's challenging. I think that's a not a big qualm in my mind, but just the problem I have with the broadcast in general is I can't stand when they say this just happened a minute ago. When they come back from break or they come back from something else, don't tell us what's going to happen. When they say this just happened a minute ago or just a second ago, you know something big is going to happen, right? It happens every time, and they continue to do it for some reason. So, Josh, that's more of a broadcast problem for me, and but I don't have very many qualms, but I see where the qualms are coming from.
I just, like, to your point, my biggest complaint is just the complexity. You know, I don't want to have to study a breakdown sheet to figure out where to watch golf, especially when it's a major. Like I want to just be able to go to one place and have it delivered. And I understand that different networks want to get their piece of it. I understand all of that. But please find a way to just make it easier for people who are just casually watching to get to it. Like if for example, this is one of the things that I was thinking about. If Peacock wants to have 4 hours of Thursday and 4 hours of Friday, then give them that, but allow people to access it from whatever feed they were coming from before. You know what I mean? Like just make it easier to get to, or create a hub on the PGA Tour website or wherever people are accessing it from, where people can quickly get to it without because I'm watching on a TV set where I'm streaming YouTube TV and using the Peacock app. And, while Peacock has the broadcast, you've got multi-view going on YouTube TV, where Thursday you could watch the main feed and 3 featured groups all day long. Friday, for the first 5 hours of the day, you couldn't. You had to either watch the main feed on Peacock or watch the 3 featured groups, which were still being shown on YouTube TV. Just defies logic. Like it's all just so ridiculously complicated for no good reason. Like make it easy for people to watch. You're getting tons of people to watch anyway. Make it easier so more people watch.
And I think that goes to a bigger issue with where we are in the US with cable and with streaming and with all that, right? I think that could be talked about too, but I think that's a whole nother podcast time. Josh, I do want to say though, it was pretty great that last, and we don't say a lot of positive things as much, but that last hour of the broadcast being sponsored by Rolex and just not having any interruptions was pretty awesome. I will say that. Yes.
And I even saw somebody tweet out, I think it was late Sunday. At what point will the broadcast just figure out that they can CGI impose a sponsor onto the fairways from the aerial views and incorporate sponsors into the actual field of play so that we don't need to have as many commercials? The fairway on the 17th hole could be sponsored by, I don't know, anybody, Rolex, just anything that could be done week in and week out to limit the commercials and the playing through and all that stuff, which obviously we've complained about to no end before. So we don't need to do it again, but it's the point. We pretty much got a non-update on the whole PGA Tour PIF deal. They said they aren't going to say anything really detailed until there's more details sorted out, which I guess is the most anticlimactic update in the history of Live PGA Tour updates. Do you have any major thoughts on that?
No, I don't really have a lot to come by. I think I echo what I said last week. I think I'm Jack Nicklaus in this process. Let me know when it happens and we'll go from there.
Yeah. And I think if nothing else, I'm at least happy to see that it seems the folks involved there have learned their lesson when it comes to spilling the beans too early or perhaps, stepping on themselves without having all the T's crossed and I's dotted. So good stuff.
You can't
there.
Look at the U.S. Open last week and figure that we can't get to that point where we have all the players playing against each other. You just can't. I don't think any human can watch that and say this. So let's get this done. I don't know what we're waiting for.
100%. Okay, so let's look forward here. We've got the Travelers. Rory is out of the field. What are you watching for this weekend?
Another elevated event, Josh, and feels like we've had just a packed schedule. And I know that's because of the Olympics a little bit too, and that's kind of condensed things a little bit. And I just feel like we're go. I thought maybe we'd see more with Josh, to be honest, in terms of other guys kind of not playing this week. But we're only seeing Rory out of the field at this point. But we're going to kind of gear up to play that last major. And it feels like the major season, the golf season is sort of slipping away a little bit. I know it's kind of crazy. It feels like summer just started in some places and hasn't even started.
Yeah, look, I'm right there with you. I am now at a point where, and I understand this season's a little unique because of the Olympics. I'm now to the point where I don't like the PGA Tour schedule anymore. Like, all of the meaningful regular season golf is done before we even get to late spring here in the Northeast. Like, is golf a winter sport or is it a warm weather sport, summer sport? Like, to me, I want to see golf pushed further, and I understand you don't want to be competing with with the NFL.
Day, though. But
like, you have to do something about fixing this where you can't have all of the most, you've talked a lot about the historical context of, like the Arnold Palmer Invitational, the Players, the Memorial, the Genesis, Tigers tournament, even the WM Open, like the historical importance in terms of golf history, professional golf history in those tournaments is so significant. You can't front load them so far in the beginning of the season that by the time you get to June 20th, the Travelers tees off on June 20th, and that will be the last Thursday we have meaningful golf in the regular context of the PGA Tour until August. No, you can't. I don't care how many majors there are. I don't care what other events there are. I don't care what the Olympics is doing. None of it matters to me. Like, at the end of the day, you can't have a gap that large in what the average consumer of golf, whether they watch professional golf or they just play golf with their buddies, is thinking this is peak golf season. Can't.
Right. Yeah.
Can't do it.
Josh, we're going to see a little bit of a different schedule next year already. We know this. The Memorial's moved that to the slot it was in the past. Yeah. And now the Memorial starts. The first practice round is on Memorial Day. Figure that one out. So there's just a 1 year hiatus that it was in a different week, but next year confirmed it is starting on Memorial Day. And then we'll go the following week. So now it won't be the week before the U.S. Open, which is something Jack didn't like. He says I was a guy that doesn't play the week before the U.S. Open. I don't know why I should host a tournament that has the week before the U.S. Open. And I think he's right there, and we're not going to see it. It does kind of stink for the RBC Canadian Open because you would think now that's going to be the tournament that's sandwiched in between. And that tournament's gotten so much hype over the last few years. So maybe it could come as a consequence of that. You could see a lot of the bigger guys skipping it. We'll see what happens. And we don't even know that that's for sure going to be the tournament in the middle. I'm just kind of putting context clues together. Right, Josh?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll see how that goes. I think an interesting exercise would be for us to come up with what we think would be a sensible PGA Tour schedule from start to finish, just to see
you're a big logistics guy. You'll love that. I'll let you do that.
The wheels are already turning. The wheels are already turning. Hey, that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram for more this week. And remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.